A lot of relationships can have tense moments, especially when it comes to finances. What I have found is that normally tense arguments, sometimes even moments about money, is typically because relationships and couples didn't have the right conversations. And so, what I want to do today is kind of walk through a beginning, middle, and end of what conversations you should be having with your partner, things that you should be prioritizing as a couple, and just ways to help work through any financially tense moments. So, one of the things that I get to experience as a financial advisor is when we have conversations with families. Sometimes those conversations can feel a little tense. And I think that some of the tension comes from just not being on the same page. So, in a lot of relationships, people might have different opinions about spending. They might have different opinions about how much they should be saving for retirement, or a difference on the priority of paying off debt. And so I think that one of the big things that we experience is, I think most of that tension, or in some cases it becomes an actual argument, right? I think a way that we could lessen that, because I do think at the end of the day, right, even in a family or in a relationship, there's still two human beings. So we are still human. And so we do sometimes judge or are quick to anger when maybe we shouldn't be. But I think fundamentally, if you can truly understand about your partner at the very beginning of this financial conversation, what does money mean to you, or what did it look like growing up? And so I believe in being transparent and sharing a lot about my own life, because again, we're all human. And so I'll just share with you, for my husband, his opinion is that when you're talking about money, there's a problem. And so for us, very quickly understanding like, hey, I just want to show you the spreadsheet or the budget, and I want to have a collaborative conversation because I don't want to make these decisions myself. I needed to understand that in order for us to do that first, there had to be this very open and honest conversation at the beginning of, hey, look, we're talking about money because we need to make plans and we need to have important decisions to make together, but there's nothing wrong. I'm not coming to the table saying, hey, we're spending too much money, or hey, we can't buy our house that we want to buy, or anything like that. It's just there are avenues and directions that we need to explore together to make these decisions. But he has anxiety around money. And so that conversation is to him immediately shut down of like, don't buy gas, don't buy groceries, don't spend any money, just stop. When that's not what I'm saying. And so it became me understanding what I'm saying and how he's hearing that, and him understanding what I'm actually saying. And our pastor always says this line, he says, don't hear what I'm not saying. And so that kind of is like the beginning of our conversation, of that framing of like, what does money mean to you? Does it mean anxiety? Does it mean control? Does it mean opportunity? Does it mean peace? Does it mean freedom? So for him, it was a source of anxiety at the beginning. So we had to kind of work through that. I'm coming from a different situation where it doesn't necessarily mean anxiety for me, but it's also not something that my family really talked about. So I'll give you an example. We took our kids to Worlds of Fun yesterday, a local amusement park in the Midwest, and each kid had a budget of what they were allowed to spend for the day outside of money, right? So like if we were getting lunch, that wasn't part of their budget. We got Dippin' Dots, that wasn't part of their budget because the whole family was getting it, but they wanted to buy some souvenirs. And so we gave them a dollar amount they were allowed to spend. And I was thinking about this, and I don't say this to slight my parents at all, but I never knew those things. Like there was never a conversation of, hey, Christina, we're going to go to Disney World, or we're going to go camping, or we're going to do XYZ. And this is how much it's costing our family, and this is how much you are allowed to spend. That was not something I was aware of. And so we're trying really hard with our children to say, hey, look, we've got zoo passes, and we've got Worlds of Fun passes, and we've got trampoline park passes. So like we invested the money up front to have these annual passes, and that was an investment. But because we have those annual passes, we can't go crazy every time we go to these places. Like we can't go to the zoo and drop $100 every time we go to the zoo, because that's just financially not sustainable, right? So having these conversations with our kids of, hey, look, at the zoo, maybe we only get, they have really good kettle corn there. Maybe we only do that, every other time we go or something, so that they have that expectation of money is a resource and it needs to be used responsibly. And so I'm coming from, we didn't talk about that. We just spent money. And as kids, my sister and I just, unfortunately, we kind of thought it was this endless supply that as adults, we had to learn, oh, hey, that's not how that works. So I'm coming from it with, we never talked about it at all. And my husband's coming from it as it feels like a lecture. And so that was our first kind of conversation with each other was, what does this even mean? So in order for us to have more fruitful conversations later on in our relationship, we have to understand where we're both coming from first. So now that we've challenged each other and identified where we're coming from, the next thing is to identify what our goals are. And so I think you should do this financially, but you should also just do this in life in general or in parenting, pretty much everything in your life. If you have a partner, it's important to understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. So like if you have kids, what are your educational goals for your kids, or what are your extracurricular goals for your kids, to make sure you're on the same page. Your faith you should probably discuss, your budget definitely you should discuss, your travel plans. So some of the things that I think that couples should talk about are, what does a good life look like for you? So is it that your definition of a good life is 2 to 3 vacations a year and eating out for dinner once a week? Or is it that you invest in a very, very nice kitchen because you don't want to eat out? And so that's where I think, again, there could be this communication breakdown, right? So if one partner is planning for, I want to go on 3 trips every year. Well, one, and there's nothing wrong with that, but how much does that cost? And then, because here's what happens normally. If you're not communicating about that well, and let's just say it's me. I don't want to go on 3 trips a year because I don't like to travel that much. But let's say I do want to. How much does that cost? And then the kind of cascading impact of that is, what does that do to our monthly budget? So if you have one partner who wants to travel a lot and you have another partner who maybe doesn't want to travel as much, but maybe it's important to them to take the kids to a movie every week, or maybe it's important to them to try a new restaurant every week, or maybe it's important to them to always have the latest and greatest technology. None of those are bad things. What can become an issue is that in your monthly budget, if my goal is I want to go to Disney World once a year and I want to go to Universal once a year, and then I just want to go on a camping trip or a float trip, or I want to buy an RV or whatever that is, right? I have to account for that in my monthly cash flow. So if I have in my mind, hey, for our budget, in order to make these trips happen, Disney's expensive, right? So if that's my thing, then I need to know, hey, in my budget, I probably need to plan for $500 to $600 a month going towards fulfilling my goals. But I have to communicate that, and we have to have a budgeting conversation around, can we do that? And then on the other side, if I think I need $500 to $600 a month for travel or XYZ purchase, and my partner thinks that we need to try the new restaurant every week, well, that's probably $150. If you're doing that every week, that's also $600 a month. So then there's the conversation of, can our budget sustain both of us spending $600 a month, one on trying new restaurants and one on setting it aside for travel? If your budget can do that, great. If your budget can't do that, the open and honest conversation with each other about, maybe it's that we only go to Disney every other year, or maybe it's that we only try that new restaurant every other week. So having that conversation around what is it that you want out of this life, and then defining that in a monthly sustainable chunk. Because here's what I often see. And again, I think that my lot in life as a financial advisor is to walk alongside people and see what they're going through, but also to share that knowledge with other people. Because here's what I see the most. If you don't have that open and honest conversation about, it is my goal to do XYZ, and in order to facilitate that goal, we need our budget to have X amount of dollars go into this bucket. So again, let's stick with the vacation example. In order to fulfill my goal of going to Disney World, I need to put $600 a month in my Disney savings account. Well, here's the problem. If I can't have that conversation, I still have the same want. I still have the same need. If I still want to go to Disney, but I did not have the conversation with my partner about how I can monthly work and take small steps over time to fulfill that goal, what I experience with people I work with and just with society in general, and I'm not judging, I want to be very clear because I think that everybody deep down inside has this temptation, If I didn't take the steps monthly to make that happen, but I still want to go to Disney, the temptation is there to still go to Disney, but I don't have the money. So what am I going to do? Probably going to put it on a credit card. So now as a family, we didn't have an open and honest conversation. We didn't take planning steps, and we added debt to that equation. So you can see very quickly how avoiding potentially a hard conversation at the beginning, because it could be hard to prioritize as a family whose needs and wants can we afford, and if we need to make any compromises, that can be difficult. But if we avoid that difficult conversation, it just kind of snowballs into a bigger and bigger issue where we're continuing to not communicate clearly, and now we've also added debt to the picture. So definitely very, very early on, what are your goals? What does a good life look like for you? And how can we financially make that happen? And so then after we've talked about what does a good life look like for you and how can we financially make that happen, it's important to kind of look at your habits and what are you bringing to the table, or your history, right? It's easier to say, I'm going here and here are the steps I'm going to take to get there. But what we also have to do is look at where's your starting point. So for example, are you coming to the relationship with student loan debt or with credit card debt or car payments? And do we need to address those first? And there's nothing wrong with that. This is not the time to be shy. This is not the time to hide anything. Ideally, in a perfect world, the person you're having this conversation with is someone that you're going to be partnered with for life. So there's no secrets. There's nothing we're hiding here. It's, hey, I want to go here and I want us to do it together. But before we get there, we need to address that I have student loans or credit cards or car payment or personal loans or anything like that. The other thing is habits, right? Do you have a habit of maybe before your paycheck gets direct deposited into your checking account, maybe a portion of it gets direct deposited into a savings account, or you're participating in your 401k or your 403b plan at work? Identify those habits. Are we saving enough for retirement already? Or do we have an emergency fund going? And then what is coming to the spending account is all of that being spent well. And so my husband and I literally just had this conversation yesterday. And again, in an effort to be open and honest and transparent, I literally said to him, I find myself getting frustrated because he spends big money. Like when he spends money, it is an expensive item. It's a new TV, it's a new guitar, and it's sometimes stuff we need. Like he spent we have a pool, so he spent some money buying like all the shocks and everything we need for the year. And sometimes I find myself just getting a little irritated for two reasons. One, because I'm the one that's like doing the budget. So a tiny bit of it is that I'm just a control freak, quite frankly. The second thing is it feels like big spending. But here's the thing, and I told him, I said, but I'm also pretty hypocritical, because I will get frustrated by his big purchases, but I won't think twice about the fact that I go to Quick Trip literally every day because I always top off my tank every morning. Side note, I probably drive 100 to 200 miles a day. So I literally buy gas every day. But I also go inside and get a snack and a drink every morning. And it's so funny because I guarantee you, if you added up all of my small purchases, they are way more expensive than his big ones. The problem is, they don't feel that way because it's, $15 a day. And that doesn't feel big because I feel like $15 feels so small. But when his is, oh, I bought this new TV and it's $700, that feels a lot harder to swallow. However, again, if you added it up, I definitely spend way more than he does. And so that's what we're talking about. What are the habits you're bringing to the table? And I will say, because we had that earlier conversation of what does money mean to us and what are our financial goals, even though I get slightly frustrated, we both know that we are okay to spend that money because we do have money. Our paychecks are split up between like 8 different accounts. And so we've got an account for travel. We've got an account for utilities. We've got an account for taking care of our horses. We have an account for taking care of our household bills. We have an account for groceries and eating out. We have multiple accounts. So I will say, while I get flustered sometimes, at the end of the day, if those dollars that he's buying a TV or I'm spending money at Quick Trip, whatever that is, if that money hits that account, it's literally for that purpose. So because we had that conversation of what are our goals, how will we afford them, and what are our habits, again, we have set up for ourselves guidelines or like lanes on a highway where we've said if that money's in that lane, it's literally there for that purpose. So it's kind of dumb of me to get frustrated, but I do. And that's something I need to work on. But we can only have those lanes or those guidelines because we had those hard conversations up front. And we said, okay, look, out of every paycheck, how many dollars do we want to go for travel? Okay, so that paycheck, that part gets direct deposited straight into a travel account. So we don't have to have the daily conversations because it's already set up. But again, we only could do that because we had the hard conversations up front and we had the collaboration sessions and we had the frustrating moments between the two of us where I think we probably wanted to fight each other, but we figured it out. And because we figured it out, now it's a little bit more streamlined and a little more peaceful on that front. And so, the goal of these conversations is you have the conversation up front. What does money mean to you? What are the goals that we have individually for life, and what are the goals that we have as a family for life, and how do we make that work in our financial budget? And then addressing again habits or history, things that have already happened that we need to habits we need to reinforce because we have really good habits, or habits we need to work on maybe reducing, and then paying off any debt or at least having a strategy for that, right? But here's the thing, it's not whether you're having an individual help you with this, because I think a lot of people probably do end up having like parents or even marriage counselors or financial advisors walk them through this. Here's the thing. A couple can survive having different opinions, and a relationship can survive money. What a relationship cannot survive is bad communication. And so here's the thing. Again, we're talking about budgeting right now, but in life, there are going to be so many hurdles or roadblocks or areas for communication that it's going to be important to have that effective communication. So what I would say is this whole thing is not about numbers. Like, yes, the numbers are the topic. We got to figure out a budget, right? But it's more about having open and honest trust and communication with each other. And I think also confidence, right? So confidence that I know that Sean can effectively manage our budget and spend, if he's spending dollars that he thinks needs to spend because we've had open and honest communication with each other, because we trust each other. I am confident that he will handle things the way he needs to. He's confident that I will handle the things I need to. And because that's the thing, right? We trust and we know with each other. We know what we went through growing up. We know what we brought to the table when we got married 16 years ago. We know kind of where we were each coming from. We know what each other's goals are individually. We know what our family goals are. And doing that has just allowed us to trust each other so much more. And that would be my hope and my prayer for every relationship, is that you get to a place where you just trust each other so much, and you've prioritized and you've communicated and you've collaborated with each other, that these tension conversations or these tense money moments would get less and less over the years. It's not going to start, flip a switch and all of a sudden everything's perfect. But over time, that should get much easier. And then that's when you really see the blessing in your relationship of, we've done the hard work and now we know, hey, we're saving for retirement and we're going to have a great retirement because you had that conversation. Or we're going to be able to send our kids to college, or we're sending them to trade school, or help them buy their first car. Whatever your goals are, because you've been open and honest with each other and because you have that trust, you'll see the fruit of that, I think, much more quickly. And I think it will make your marriage even stronger, your relationship stronger. You don't have to be married, but if you're doing your money together, I think it will just make it stronger. And the last thing I would say is, not every conversation will be easy, but if you know the direction that you're going and you understand each other's heart, it builds the foundation for a much smoother relationship and a much smoother financial life. So those would be the things that I would encourage you with. Be open and honest with each other. If you need help with your budget, please seek out, again, like a parent, a family friend, a financial advisor. That's just part of how you have a successful life and a successful relationship. So if you need help with that, don't be ashamed, because most Americans need help with that. And I think that your partner in your relationship will really benefit from it.